Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm DJ Sixsmith. Welcome to Sit Down. Michael Mechanic here with us, his brand new book, Jackpot from Simon Schuster. Michael, really nice to meet you. How's it going?
Oh, it's going great. Go with you.
Everything's good. Listen, we are looking for new stuff to read. We're getting back out there in the world. And one thing that remains the same is that we have a fascination when it comes to the ultra wealthy and the ultra rich in this country. So, what was it like writing this book and what inspired you to do so?
Well, it was actually an idea I had probably 2 decades ago. I was just sort of thinking about our fascination with lottery winners and how the conventional wisdom is that winning the lottery ruins your life. And I kind of wanted to see, well, what's the truth behind that? Can we talk to some of these people, see what their experiences have been like? And that was just sort of a back burner, one of many ideas I've had over the years. And it actually would have been really impractical to pull off because lottery winners go off the radar completely. They don't want to talk to you. They've been besieged by, long lost friends and relatives looking for a loan or scammers or whatever. It really does mess with your reality, especially when you're not ready for it and you have no idea how to handle this kind of wealth. Um, so yeah, it wouldn't have worked as a book, but also the idea was to have like each chapter would be a different lottery winner's experience. And not only could I not find them, but it seemed like it would be kind of limited in scope. And I decided when, it came time to actually write this book to flesh out what a jackpot meant. And that would be more realistic things like having a startup company that sells or getting in on a massive IPO or things that we can relate to a little more than the dumb luck of winning the lottery. And also there's a lot of nuance because, how you earn your money has a lot to do with how you react to it. And, if you inherit it, if you get it by luck, which is also inheriting is by luck, or if you, have built something that you care about. So it really changes the psychology of wealth.
We don't necessarily think about how people come into their money. We're just so focused on the money itself, the lifestyle, but there's so much more to it, like you're saying. And, I'm interested because I'm sure you encountered a lot of different surprises along the way. What was most intriguing that you found out just in terms of writing this book and talking to folks?
Well, we've all kind of heard a lot about wealth inequality in this country, but when you dig into the details of it, it's just some of them are so absurd and so bizarre, things you just never think about. Like, for instance, okay, sales taxes, right? You and I, well, the 1%ers in this country pay about 2 cents on every dollar they earn in sales taxes. The very poor in this country pay about 10 cents on every dollar they earn. And part of the reason for that is the way we tax goods and services. A lot of the things that are consumed by very wealthy people, including like legal services, accounting services, buying box seats at a Warriors game, theater and opera tickets, those things aren't taxed. Whereas, everyday items that every family needs are taxed. There's also caps on luxury items, like if you buy $100 million yacht in New Jersey, I think it's the maximum sales tax is $22,000. In South Carolina, there's a tax cap of $500. So you could buy a Gulfstream jet in South Carolina, pay a $500 sales tax, whereas you buy a Honda Civic, you would normally pay more than that, right? So there's so the wealthy are definitely getting a little benefit. Even wine. Okay, so wine. If I go to Trader Joe's and buy a bottle of $2 Chuck, the tax on that bottle of wine is the same as if a billionaire buys a $2,000 Chateau Latour.
That's crazy.
Because it's charged by volume. Now these are just weird little details, but when we all think we know about the extent of wealth inequality, especially since there's been all the talk. Joe Biden's been talking about it, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. We really have no idea how crazy it is. I mean, the bottom 40%, the least wealthy 40% of Americans have zero wealth, zero. And it cancels out. I mean, the people at the top of that range have some, but the people at the bottom are in debt. So if you look at that group collectively, no wealth, which is astounding in a country that's supposed to be egalitarian. One of the things that I talk about how this came to pass, and a lot of it is in our tax code. And the tax code, I like to say, is a moral document. It's an expression of our values as a society and what we want to reward and what we want to punish. And for quite a while, it's been set up so that it rewards passive capital. In other words, if you have a ton of money to invest, you get a much lower tax rate on the gains in that money that you invest in the markets or whatever. Whereas if you're working, every day for wages, you pay much higher tax. And Biden's trying to flip that now, but we'll see what happens.
There's a lot of really interesting conversations happening about the wealth tax, and even just the way you described it, it's really astounding how many people don't have any wealth, right? How many people don't have anything to contribute to the economy. And that's why it's so interesting going backwards to think about this idea of trickle down economics and how folks think about that. So when you think historically about wealth, what are the other things we need to focus on in order to try and make things better going forward for everybody?
Well, I think we just have to really think about about equity and intergenerational wealth for one. The estate tax, for instance, I just actually read a paper on this the other day by somebody that Biden is nominating to be in the Treasury Department as a top tax advisor. And she points out that the collective tax on inheritances, 2%. And we were just talking about the difference between, capital income and wage income. Well, isn't it a little bit crazy that money you just give to your children is only taxed at 2%? That's income. You think about it, that's income.
Absolutely.
And it's income for which nobody has done anything. The parents will say, well, that money's already been taxed because I was taxed on it before I gave it to my kids. But so is the money that you pay the plumber who fixes your pipes in your house. Mm-hmm. And that guy's expected to pay taxes, right? And he's providing a service. Whereas your heirs are not necessarily providing any service. Could be the opposite, right? So her whole thing, Lily, I can't remember her last name right now. Her confirmation hearing is soon. She wants to get rid of the estate tax and charge income tax to the heirs who are getting that money, so it would be treated as income as opposed to taxing estates. And she says, actually that intergenerational wealth has really perpetuated inequality in our country, including racial inequality, because white families have vastly more wealth to pass on to their kids than Black families do. The wealth gap right now is 10x at least between white families and Black families. Latino families are also, it's like 8x white over Latino as far as family wealth. So, there's a lot of considerations, like policy considerations, but in the book, I kind of argue that it takes more than that. It takes support of the people who have the power and the money in society, which is not just the 1%. It's, the top 20%, the top 10%, more as you go up the scale, obviously. It's like exponential if you look at the charts. But the people at the top have political clout, they have access, and most of them are not, trying to game the system. They are benefiting from the system as it is. But if they can see and recognize the unfairness in it and say, hey, this isn't right, and step up and actually, speak out about it, that's what's going to be needed.
There isn't always a willingness to change the status quo when you benefit from it, right? So right. It's like these tax codes benefit folks right now. The wages not meeting the inflation benefits a lot of people right now. So I guess when you think about it, what is the most important thing that needs to change? Is it more people gaining more money, gaining more power? Or is it, like you're saying, the people at the top realizing, you know what, I need to step away from this and think about somebody else besides myself? How do you think that goes?
It's super interesting because I have a chapter called Thriving While Black, and that it's all about the history of, the suppression of Black wealth. And one of my characters, Darren Walker, who's the president of the Ford Foundation, he says he gets together with wealthy Black friends and he has disagreements with them. He says, this guy is like, oh yeah, I want to repeal the estate tax, or I'm in favor of legacy admissions to, elite universities, because he's got to that point and now he has the advantage. And he said, what Darren said to me, he said, I'm worried about the Black people now who are acting privileged, right? Mm-hmm. Because now they have this wealth and they want to perpetuate. Obviously, if you're Black in this country, you've missed out on, centuries of wealth building. So it's totally understandable why you would want to, once you get there, to maintain the status quo, because now you got yours, right? But it's pretty bad for society to have some of these rules in place. And I think there's been a bit of an awakening in the past year because we've seen the pandemic just lay bare the inequalities, and we've seen the murder of George Floyd and the racial equity protests. In fact, if you look at philanthropy, philanthropists have opened their wallets and given to racial equity more in 2020 than the past decade combined. That could be temporary. It could be just like, oh, we feel bad about this. Now we're going to open our wallets and then go back to business. But I like to be optimistic that there's been a bit of an awakening where even people in pretty high tiers of wealth, some of them they're looking at their lives and they're saying, and they're looking across the street and go, oh, this is not right, and maybe feeling a little bit of compulsion to, I can give up some of this advantage to give those people more.
You couldn't look away from it in 2020, right? Whether it's what you're saying with George Floyd, whether it's the pandemic, we were forced to face all these things racially, economically, just how we live our lives. And yeah, it definitely impacted rich folks. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes in this country. And even just the relationship between money and power, right? It is just such a huge part of our society. And as you mentioned before, it wasn't always this egregious, right? It became just ramped up in a whole different way, maybe the last couple of decades. So do you think this all gets worse before it gets better, or are you more optimistic that things will get a little bit better as we go along here?
Well, I think it's even starting to get better with, I don't know, this administration is seizing the moment to try and enact proposals that would level the playing field. And actually in philanthropy too, there's a lot of more thought towards not just giving to Band-Aid kind of causes, but giving causes that are actually trying to change the system, giving to political efforts and that sort of thing. And that's a big difference. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of philanthropy as, oh, you have these tremendous advantages and that allow you, sure, you're smart and you work hard and, but so does, your cleaning woman. It's the hard work is necessary, but not sufficient, as one character says. A lot of it's luck, timing, family advantages that got you into the place that you're at. Nobody is self-made in this country. I don't believe that. We hear that word all the time, but I think it's a myth. I think it's a self-aggrandizing myth. And so, we all depend on each other for all sorts of things. And so we are a collective. And we saw in sort of the botched response to the pandemic, the danger of thinking too much for ourselves and not for other people.
No, it's a great way to put it. And there's a lot to chew on here. I wonder, in the people that you talked to, was there anybody that was able to change their mind a little bit to what you were talking about them with, or were people just kind of hunkered down in their corners and, they came into their money their way, they're going to hold on to their money, or it's the other way. It's just that I've always been one to give my money away. Was there anybody who kind of changed course based on what's happened, or any conversations you had with them?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I mean, one guy is one of the top Black auto executives in this country. And he actually just moved over to Amazon. But he started a thing called the Lantern Network, which the whole goal is to reach down to sort of aspiring, talented young Black people who kind of need help getting to the next level, and having a professional network introductions to the people they need, because those things, if you are wealthy and white, that's built in, and male, I should say, because women don't have the same financial networks that men do. Men tend, because the sort of super lucrative professions, finance and venture capital and all this stuff, are very male, men tend to know more people in those fields. So they have this, oh yeah, I know that guy, or a friend of a friend who can provide capital if I want to start a business. Women don't have that same network, and it's hard for them to get money to start a business. In fact, one crazy thing I learned, not till 1974 could a woman go into a bank and get a loan without her husband's signature.
It's insane.
It is. It was not that long ago. I mean, I was 10 years old. I had no idea. I mean, I'm sure our moms had plenty of an idea because they couldn't, if you wanted to start a business, forget it unless you have a man on your side. I mean, that's just repulsive. We've had these egalitarian ideals since our founding, but in reality, things are very much set up for people of a certain position already. And so you have to struggle to get there.
And it takes conversations like this to help move things forward. And it's funny because you have these conversations and some people can look inward and understand the privilege and what they've been afforded, and other people just will never see that, right? They just think they are those self-made people, or they've done everything and worked hard. So I think your book will definitely drum up some interesting points of view.
I've had some wealthy people who've read the book say this sort of changed the way I think about all of this. Because, I think you always think you know what you know, but when you spend 2 years deeply researching something, you're going to dig up a lot of really fascinating stuff that is not well known. And putting it all together, I mean, it's sort of a lot of like every chapter of this book, pretty much somebody has written a book on that particular subject. But what I do is sort of bring it together in this arc that just sort of shows you how absurd our society has grown. And maybe, it's a little bit, the New York Times thought I was a little too optimistic in the end. And I struggled with that. So, because, a new administration's coming in, we've got the pandemic, we've got the racial justice, protests across the nation. And I'm sort of like, well, where are we right now? Is there hope of changing this? America is now, we're currently number 2 among all developed nations for the greatest inequality, economic inequality. And we think of ourselves as, the society where everyone has equal opportunity. Well, that's nonsense. They don't. I mean, it was never about total equality, right? That would be communism, right? Everybody gets paid the same for different tasks. That's not desirable. The question is, does the CEO make 20 times what his workers do, or does he make 300 times what his workers do, which is the way it is now, 350 actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's not optimism, that's just realism right there. I think you're acknowledging both those things, but it's funny how it can be interpreted when you do have any sort of optimism about this conversation.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to checking this book out. Michael, really nice to meet you, man. Thanks so much, and talk to you down the road, all right?
Thanks a lot, DJ.